Morning, guys. Pretty excited today. We are going to be testing a brand new translator. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that word, the translator was something we used to use from Saleen, and it was a MAF translator. Essentially allowed the Z32 guys running a stock ECU to run a second MAF. So from the factory, the Z32, the 300ZX, whether it was a turbo or non-turbo, ran a single N62 MAF, mass airflow meter. And they have two separate piping to connect everything, but you had a Y right in the center that would read right off your MAF and separate it. So obviously that can be a restriction once you start moving a lot more airflow. So what we have on this car is an old school JWT Jim Wolf technology dual pop. So you can clearly see on this setup, it uses still one mass airflow meter, and the other side uses what's called a dummy MAF. This worked and was pretty decent, but you aren't getting a super accurate measurement of airflow going into the engine in total. So we're basically blindly expecting that whatever side, this side is moving X amount of air, that this side is essentially doing the same thing, and you would trick the ECU into thinking that. So the other thing that had to happen running this setup is we needed to get some airflow at idle off the other bank of the engine. So bank one, we had to get airflow, and to do that is we had to run what was called the low speed drivability hose. So this teed in to your idle air circuit, and you would run a hose through, and usually this was done per the JWT instructions on the factory recirculation valve on the passenger side, bank one. So kind of funky, it wasn't pretty. You had this hose running up. We did this for many years. We kind of had a different way of running it to make it look cleaner, and we had sort of a U junction versus a T. With the translator, we don't need to run that anymore because now the engine is getting feedback from that second MAF. So one big benefit there. The other benefit is the tune comes out a lot better. So you're getting a better measurement of what's actually going on that other side of the engine. So we're going to be testing that today. So what's really cool is here is the prototype that we're running. Chris from twinturbo.net was gracious enough to send us one, a prototype to test. You'll see that for the guys who are familiar with the old Saleen translator, it's pretty close to the same, essentially, the version 2. So you have, we'll start off with the case. So you can see that all this detaches, which is really nice. This will come with a bracket that will allow you to bolt it down somewhere in here. Usually it'll be a 90-degree bracket that comes off of it. And you'll have your LED, status LED, that'll tell you if there's a fault. So let's say you have a mass airflow meter that's bad. This will allow you to know and make sure that it powers up correctly. So it'll flash a green light and red if there is a problem. On the left-hand side, we have our switch. So really easy to get to. You don't have to take anything apart. And what this does is it allows you to run your tune either in the add configuration or average configuration. So with this car, we're gonna be running this, obviously already it's on a dual pop setup, so it's gonna be average. So we are gonna set this up for average, so it's gonna be on the right of the module. We're gonna go to the right for average, left for add. So we'll leave that on the right. And the harness, pretty self-explanatory. You have 3 connectors. 2 of them will go to each mass airflow meter. And this plug goes directly into the factory MAF connector on the EFI engine harness. So we are going to make some pulls on this car. We're gonna tune it for this setup. We'll leave it alone. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna add our second MAF. So another factory N62 mass airflow meter. We're gonna add this bad boy on bank 1 of the engine, connect all this, and we'll see what changes, if there's any difference in power. But the biggest thing is, of course, is the change in the tune. So again, really simple plug and play way of adding a second MAF to your car. There's been other ways of doing it. This is one way. Another way is you can run an Apex AFC. That requires a little bit more work. You got to install the AFC, then you got to run a couple of wires to the second MAF. So a little more tedious of an install. This was just really convenient to have a setup like this. So let's get going. We're gonna make some pulls, get this all dialed in as is, and we'll move on to the translator testing. So besides the benefit of getting more air to the engine, the other benefit, of course, was we are always limited how much airflow a single mass airflow meter can measure. So it's a 0.5 volt sensor. Once you start moving approximately about 500 horsepower worth of air, this guy's gonna max out. So meaning once you start making more power than that, the ECU doesn't know that more air is going in. So it's going to run lean. So the beauty of this is we set our tune-up for average, we add our second MAF, and essentially we're doubling how much air the ECU and the MAFs can measure. So that's another huge thing. So technically you could easily do 1,000 horsepower worth of airflow on the stock ECU. So that's the other huge advantage of doing it this way too. All right guys, so pretty simple install. Obviously this thing already had the dual pop setup. All we did was add the MAF, the translator. We kept the same air filter on this side for testing purposes, of course. But yeah, really simple. Car is running and idling. We didn't make any changes to the tune. It's already set for average. Of course, you gotta make sure the switch is on the appropriate setting, AVG, and we'll go make some passes. All right guys, so we've done our passes. What we did is we dialed the tune in with the dummy MAF setup using the low speed drivability hose, single MAF. We got our air fuels really good for pump 91 octane. This car is a little sensitive with knock, so we really couldn't go up with more boost. Every car is very unique in that aspect. So again, really important why we tune with knock headphones, so we can listen for that knock. But in any case, for the results, here it is. Blue is with the dummy MAF setup. We've got our air fuel ratios in the mid-11s for the most part. And all we did was add the translator, set it to average, installed what is known as a good used MAF, and pretty interesting to see the results. So keep this in mind, guys, for you guys installing a translator. Our air fuel ratios and our tune significantly changed. So right at 4,600 RPM, you can see that it actually leaned out almost 2 full points. Really dramatic right in this area. So between about 3,700 and 5,000 RPM, it's almost 2 points leaner. So really good idea to check the tune on the dyno, especially if it's been tuned for the dummy MAF setup. So what we did have to do, since a majority of my bass tunes have been created using the translator from the past, this setup was really rich. So we actually had to pull a significant amount of fuel in this area in the tune. So it would make sense as to why now it needs more fuel. So keep this in mind, guys. If it's been dyno tuned or it has a tune really that was made for the dummy MAF setups, good idea to check it. So if you had a wideband on your car, even better, take it to the dyno, get your air fuel readings checked. So because this car isn't gonna leave with the translator, we're gonna put it all back together with the dummy MAF setup. We'll double check it again just to verify these results are accurate, and we will finish off. But translator is doing its job. It is reading and it's doing what it's supposed to. So our values in the tune obviously would need to change if we were gonna leave this translator. We definitely don't want the car leaving this lean. So we can look at the power, but it really isn't an apples to apples comparison, because we would need to definitely richen this up, which would probably bring our power back to where our blue run is. So it's making more power because it's lean. So not where we would want to leave it. So power would be about the same. All right, guys, so we've wrapped up our testing on the Chris translator. Thank you, Chris, for sending us one out so we can test it out. Really appreciate that and look forward to selling and installing them as well. So just to recap, we installed the dummy MAF on the setup, since the car isn't leaving with that translator. So what we did do is I just threw in a little bit of butane to bring the octane up to see what this car would do with better fuel. So reminder, this is the one that had really nasty, disgusting fuel tank in this thing. So the boys did a really good job of cleaning a majority of it out. We pulled out both sending units out, cleaned them all up, used Scotch-Brite on everything, and got a majority of all that rust out of there. It was a lot of work. So we did fill up with fresh 91 octane. So is it possible, you know, obviously maybe dealing with some remnants of that? Who knows? I'm definitely gonna recommend replacing the fuel filter in the next month or two just to stay on top of things. But adding butane, we got boost up to what we can usually run on a set of bigger turbos. So it appears that this has the Garrett GT2860 RSs done by Z1. So that'd be the 675 RS kit from Z1. Really good. I mean, it's just got 2.5-inch exhaust. It still has the stock intercooler piping. That's all 2-inch. So really, it did really well. So 16 pounds of boost with these turbos, got it up to 449, and it did good. You can see air fuels are good with that WMAF setup. So again, be careful if you are gonna be adding a translator on there to double check the state of tune after you install it. Just don't go willy-nilly thinking it's gonna be okay. So yeah, good results, really happy. I know their Z32 gets to be at its fullest.